If you look with me tonight to Acts chapter 25, I think we finished up with chapter 24 last week. And so we'll be looking, starting in chapter 25. Now, last week he had spoke before Felix, and Felix had told him that he trembled at the words that he heard. I believe the Holy Spirit got a hold of him. And in verse 25 of Acts 24 says, "Go your way for this time. When I have a convenient season, I'll call for you." He called for him many, many other times, I believe, in verse 26, but wanting, I guess, some bribe money, basically, to try to get him released. But that never happened. And I don't find that he ever gave himself to the Lord. But then verse 27 tells us that a fellow by the name of Festus has now taken over Felix's spot. And so let's read a little bit about Festus. And this ain't talking about the guy on Gunsmoke. But just as a bonus, those of you got YouTube, if you'll look up Ken Curtis singing, to hear him talk, you would never thought he could sing, but he was at one time the lead singer for the Sons of the Pioneers. But anyway, that's just extra, because Festus is in the Bible. Huh?
He really looked good, too.
Yeah.
Instead of how he looked as Festus.
Yeah. And then if you're really good at YouTubing, you can find a video of him dressed up as Festus, but with that singing voice, and that really threw me off. And but anyway, that's just extra because we see the word Festus here. Let's read verses 1 through 9, and we'll see what the Lord has for us there. We may get a little bit further than that. But it says in verse 1, "Now when Festus was coming into the province after 3 days, he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul and besought him and desired favor against him that he would send for him to Jerusalem, laying wait in the way to kill him." Now, I wonder if it's any of them dudes that said, we ain't going to, I need to stop that, I guess. But anyway, them 40 guys that said we ain't going to eat until he dies. Maybe, I don't know if they's going to be the ones laying in wait for him or not. But again, verse 3, "They desired favor against him that he would send for him to Jerusalem, laying wait in the way to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thither. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down unto Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. And when he was come, the Jews came down from Jerusalem, stood round about, laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar, have I offended anything at all. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, Wilt thou go up to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these things before me? So they came to Festus, as they had many times before, tried to get Paul done away with, but at the moment he was going to leave him in Caesarea. Now, here's some information about Festus, the one here in the Bible, not the one on Gunsmoke, but his reign was a short reign. Now, my Schofield Bible has this dated as AD 62, and this commentary that I have some notes from says that his reign was from 59 to somewhere around 62. So he not reigning there very long. Says very little's known about him. He died 2 years after being appointed governor of Judea. He was a more reasonable and upright ruler than Felix, and apparently wished to establish and administer a just rule throughout his domain. And I think in chapter 26 is his last time we hear of him. But as it says there, they came in verse number 3 seeking a favor of him. And it doesn't really record what they said, but if we can go back to what everybody else had been saying up to this point, they probably buttered him up really good, telling him what a fine feller they've heard of him being, and then asked, will you send for him to Jerusalem? And their idea was, according to verse 3, they was going to lie in wait to kill him, Paul, on the way. And to begin with here, he says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to leave him in Caesarea. And as they came up there, he carried some folks with him. You come, you testify against him there. And look at verse 6. When he tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down into Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. And as he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about, laid many grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. Now, this commentary here says a couple of thoughts. First one is, the scene may be within or without the church, but it is always the same. When a group of men, either of the world or of religion, wish to get rid of God's servant, they begin to lie and make false charges. Matthew 5 and 11, in what we call the Sermon on the Mount, what we know as the Sermon on the Mount, says this, blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Now, Paul's going to have another opportunity to give his testimony. I want you to know that it wasn't just at these times that he was spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And what I'm saying that for is this. It ought not be a time when we're faced with conflict that be the first time we tell our testimony. How Jesus has blessed us, how Jesus has saved us, how Jesus has helped us through this. He's helped us through that. He has brought us to this point in our life. That ought not be when we're facing conflict. Paul's facing conflict that I hope none of us in here are ever going to face. He's been falsely accused. He's in prison. And he's standing before these dignitaries telling them about Jesus. While all the time, this other group of folks are accusing him falsely. But again, don't let that circumstance be the only time, the first time that we tell our story about Jesus. Now, just think about what the news would do this day and time. Here's these religious leaders, the Jews, accusing this man of another religion, if you want to call Christianity religion. I don't really think of it that way, but some call it that. Accusing him how bad he is. Think about what the news would do with that. They'd take a side, more than likely this day and time. It wouldn't be Walter Cronkite saying, and that's the way it is, Wednesday, January 18th, 2023. It wouldn't be that. It would be taking a side, and this is what it might be. Even though lying is a serious offense in the sight of God, There's some to be taking the side of the Jews here. Yeah, well, Paul, man, look at what all he's done. 2020 might even do a special program on him, how bad and sorry, low down he is. But all the time, what's he doing? He's trying to get as many people to know Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior as is possible. But just imagine the scene here. These religionists, even the leaders, were lying and falsely accusing Paul and even plotting to kill him. Revelation 21 verse 8 says this, all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone. And it again tells what I think we first find in Revelation 20, which is the second death. And we might interview people today who are currently, they think, separated from God. Some might even say, don't believe in him. But you think about an individual being eternally separated from God. Now, I ain't talking about a year or two. I ain't talking about a 10-year sentence you get off in 3 for good behavior. No, for all eternity. All right, let's look at verses 8 and 9. So while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar, I ain't done anything. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a favor, said, well, let's take him up to Jerusalem. After all, first he said, no, we're going to leave him Caesarea. Let's go up to Jerusalem, and there be judge of these things before me. Now, they've already testified, so let's see what happens. Let's read on down through the end of the chapter. Don't know if we'll get close to the end of the chapter or not in their comments, but let's read the rest of it and see. I think we're going to see a fellow by the name of King Agrippa, hear about him, and also his wife. Now, my grandmother had this same name, but we called her Bernice, but I think the correct pronunciation here in the King James Version is Bernice. So, but I'd never heard anybody call my granny Bernice. It was Bernice. But anyway, so we'll make that distinction when we get there. Verse 10, then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. For if I be an offender or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar. Then Festus, whom when he had conferred with the council, answered, hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar shalt thou go. And after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came unto Caesarea to salute Festus. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's curse to the king, saying, there is a certain man left in bonds by Felix, after whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priest and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him. To whom I answered, it is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die, before that he which is accused have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. Therefore, when they were come together, without any delay on the morrow, I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth, against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none occasion of such things as I supposed, but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of one Jesus, which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I doubted of such manner of questions, I asked him whether he would go to Jerusalem and there be judged of these matters. But when Paul had appealed to be reserved until the hearing of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief priests and principal men of the city, at Festus' command, Paul was brought forth. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. And when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself hath appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write to my Lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and especially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination I might have somewhat to write. For it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him. So we see here that King Agrippa and his wife Bernice have come, and you see the place that Festus is in. He's wanting to go to Caesar, but what in the world am I going to write against him? They have said nothing that he should be put to death for. I want you to think back a few years, about 30-something years before this. Same thing happened to Jesus. The government said, I find no fault in this man. But you remember he had a thought, I can release a prisoner. And the question was, Barabbas or Jesus to be released? And the crowd who days before, just a short time before, Hosanna to God in the highest, as he rode into Jerusalem, were then saying, give us Barabbas. What do you want me to do with this Jesus? Crucify him. Crucify him. And here, Paul, spreading the news about Jesus Christ, he's got the same cries for him. Not crucify him, but kill him, which is going to amount to the same. So, I don't know if you caught that or not, but Festus come in, he don't know much about Jesus. He says the Jews say he's dead. Paul says he's alive. Here's what one group of writers says. The point is the confusion and hardness of Festus in spiritual matters. He had been ignorant of Jesus and the resurrection, but not now. The gospel had just been proclaimed to him by Paul. He was now responsible to respond to Christ. But observe, his response was to scorn the idea of Jesus arising from the dead. He refused to trust and to surrender to Christ. Ephesians 4 and verse 18 says, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart. Paul writes to the church at Corinth, he says, if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, because basically Satan has blinded their eyes that they would not see. So as we look down about verse 22, Agrippa says to Festus, before you send him, I want to hear what he's got to say. And we're going to find that in chapter 26. And we'll remind you, I gave you a little preview about what Felix was going to say. Give you a little preview about what Agrippa was going to say. And somebody wrote it into a song. I can't remember who it was that wrote it. Paul, almost you persuadest me to be a Christian. Almost. And that's where we get that song, Almost Persuaded. Now, if you got a different translation of the Bible, it might say, with so many words, are you going to try to persuade me? But either way, just like Felix, I never find that King Agrippa came to saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. Here's a couple questions for you. How many commit unjust deeds and then continue the injustice in a formal setting before the public? In other words, just keep on doing it. Now, here's these Jews. Religiously speaking, they're supposed to be looking for a Messiah. Well, he's done come. He's done been put to death. He's done rose from the dead. But they wanting Paul put to death because he's still preaching about Jesus. How many deceptive and public shows are put on for the sake of simply just saving face? But I want to remind you about something. It says this several times in the Bible about us being like the flower of grass. But 1 Peter 1:24 says this, for all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of grass. The grass withereth, and the flower thereof falleth away. Somebody made a comment the other day, well, my grass is not green. It's just so brown. Well, it's wintertime. Give it a little bit, and it'll flourish again. But what's it going to do again next fall? It's going to turn that brown again. Our life is, but just, as James puts it, is just a vapor. It's just here for a short time. Yes, the grass does wither. The flower does fade. But you know what? God's word's going to stand forever. And Hebrews 13 verse 8 puts it this way. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. I'm glad he doesn't change. I meet so many people that change with every wind. Every time the wind changes direction, it seems like there's a change. Not in a good way. But Jesus Christ is the same. Yesterday, today, and forever. And we can't leave without me giving just a little bit of J. Vernon McGee. He says, as he's about to talk to King Agrippa, what a scene this was. Wherever did a preacher have a greater audience than this man? The setting is dramatic, with great pomp and ceremony, as it says as they came in, as Bernice came in. Paul appears in chains before this company of rulers and kings. And Festus is asking him, help me frame some charges up before we send him to Caesar. It ain't going to look good if we just send him. We need some stuff wrote down. Help me frame him up. And so, as we get into chapter 26, we'll once again hear Paul's testimony about Jesus Christ and what he did for him. And I can't overemphasize, if we're saved, then we've got a story to tell. The more we tell it, the better we're going to be at it. As the Lord gives us occasion, let's not pass them up. Let's tell our story of what Jesus has done for us. That's what Paul's doing. And what an example of telling about the one who died for our sins, that sits at the right hand of the Father to make intercession for us. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you, Lord, tonight for your many blessings. Thank you for allowing us to be gathered as we are. And Lord, we listed several on our prayer list tonight. Lord, we ask you to meet each of those needs. Lord, you have your own will and way in each one of those areas and with us as well. Lord, as you place people in our path, Help us to be the salt, the light that points them to you. If there's something we need to say, you let us know. If there's times we need to be quiet, you let us know. And Lord, may we follow your leadership in all those areas. We thank you for all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.